In episode 45, titled Close POA&M Items Effectively, we focus on driving findings to verified closure and turning temporary wins into lasting improvement. A plan of actions and milestones, POA&M, entry is not finished when a fix lands in production. It is finished when evidence shows the risk has been reduced to an agreed level, controls have been updated to prevent relapse, and stakeholders can see the result without decoding tribal knowledge. Closure is a measurable state, not a hopeful claim. When teams approach it with that mindset, they move from chasing green dashboards to building durable operating conditions. The theme is simple enough to remember under pressure. Fix the weakness, prove the outcome, record the facts, communicate promptly, and prevent recurrence. Everything that follows supports those 5 moves with practical discipline.
Start by defining closure criteria that match severity and the risk reductions you intend to achieve. For a critical weakness, closure criteria might require not only the primary fix, but also independent verification, configuration drift protection, and enhanced monitoring for a defined period. For a moderate issue, a validated fix with sampling-based verification and an updated procedure may be sufficient. Write the criteria in the POA&M entry before work begins so owners understand the finish line. Include the verification method, the minimum evidence set, and any time-bounded observation you require to prove persistence. Clear criteria eliminate end-stage debate and keep risk acceptance decisions honest. They also align expectations across engineering, security, and leadership, which makes later readouts faster and more credible. Implement the fix with the same care you used to define the problem, and capture evidence that proves effectiveness and persistence. Evidence should show the condition no longer exists under the same vantage points that revealed it. Configuration exports, command outputs, policy diffs, role mappings, or log traces with timestamps. For persistence, add proof that the change will survive common sources of drift such as redeployments, image refreshes, or automated pipelines. That could mean a code repository change, a template update, or a golden image rebuild. Tie each artifact to the POA&M identifier and include brief, dated notes that explain what the evidence demonstrates. The goal is not volume. The goal is sufficiency. Short, direct artifacts that any reviewer can interpret without a guided tour. Perform retests or scans that confirm vulnerabilities are no longer exploitable and record the parameters precisely. If the original issue appeared in a dynamic application scan, reproduce that scan after the fix with the same scope and rule set. Then attach a clean result with the scan metadata visible. If the weakness was observed through manual steps, retest those steps and capture the expected failure or the corrected behavior. When the finding involved systemic behavior, such as logging gaps or alert routing, run a targeted simulation to confirm the end-to-end path now behaves as intended. Retesting is not a courtesy. It is the linchpin of trusted closure. By mirroring the original observation method, you ensure that success is measured on the same field where the problem first became visible. Update control narratives and procedures so the permanent change is reflected in the documented way of working. Control narratives should explain how the revised design meets the requirement, including parameters, roles, and responsible teams. Procedures should describe the practical steps engineers and operators follow, including any new approvals, segregation of duties, or monitoring checks. When policy and procedure lag behind implementation, fixes revert quietly during churn, or new staff unknowingly reintroduce the weakness. The written word is a control surface. Treat it as part of the fix. Save versioned copies, record approval dates, and reflect the updates in onboarding materials and runbooks. This is how you convert a point-in-time remediation into a stable behavior that resists drift. Sometimes, full remediation remains infeasible in the near term, and compensating measures must be documented without pretense. If you rely on a compensating control, describe the objective it achieves, its scope and limitations, and the artifacts that prove it is operating effectively. Note residual risk explicitly and the conditions that would invalidate the measure, such as workload growth, architecture changes, or supplier updates. Set an expiration date or review interval and bind the measure to a follow-on milestone in the POA&M so it does not become permanent by neglect. Compensating controls have a place in mature programs, but only when they are transparent, monitored, and on a clear path to being replaced by a primary control. Where a fix is impractical or the residual risk is acceptable given business context, request risk acceptance with visible accountability. Risk acceptance should be rare, justified, and owned by the appropriate business leader, not by the team that discovered the issue. Provide a concise risk statement, the alternatives considered, the costs or constraints that blocked remediation, and the safeguards that reduce likelihood or impact. Specify the review horizon at which the decision will be revisited and outline the triggers that would force a change in position. Attach the acceptance record, dated and signed, to the POA&M entry so external reviewers can see that the decision followed policy. Risk acceptance is not a shortcut. It is a formal, bounded choice with a documented rationale. Record closure details with care. Dates, verifiers, and supporting artifacts should leave no room for ambiguity. The closure note should state what changed, when the change landed in each affected environment, who verified it, and which evidence demonstrates both effectiveness and persistence. If multiple steps were required, patching, configuration, and monitoring, note the date each became effective and the order in which they occurred. Include identifiers for change tickets, code commits, scan jobs, and sample items from any retest. Think of this as the audit trail a future reader will need when reconstructing events months later. If that reader can follow the thread in minutes rather than hours, your closure documentation is doing its job. Communicate outcomes to stakeholders quickly and update dashboards that drive operational awareness. Summaries to leadership should map closure to risk reduction with a sentence or two about the verification performed. Updates to engineering teams should include enough detail to prevent reintroduction, such as which templates changed and which pipelines enforce the new state. Governance teams need the refreshed status for submissions and the ability to answer sponsor questions without chasing down subject matter experts. Immediate, coherent communication closes the loop and prevents stale data from lingering in reports that guide decisions. Dashboards should refresh from the same system of record as the POA&M so numbers match across views. A brief example makes the mechanics concrete. A configuration baseline for internet-facing servers is hardened to remove weak cipher suites and enforce modern protocol settings. The team deploys the change through code, rebuilds images, and rotates instances. A retest using the same external scanner shows the weak options are gone and packet captures confirm negotiated settings align with policy. Control narratives are updated to reflect the new parameter thresholds, and procedures now require a baseline verification step during each rollout. The POA&M entry records the change ticket, image version, retest job identifier, and the verifier's name and date. With these artifacts in place, the item is closed confidently, and future audits can follow every step without guesswork. Prevent regressions by pairing monitoring alerts and change controls with the fix itself. Monitoring should detect the earliest sign of drift, unexpected configuration values, disabled controls, or newly opened network paths, and raise alerts before exposure escalates. Change control should require automated checks that block deployments reintroducing the weakness, whether via pre-commit policy tests, build time scans, or admission controllers. Document both the alerting thresholds and the block conditions so reviewers can see that you've embedded a guardrail, not just a cure. Resilience begins when the system can detect and reject old mistakes without waiting for the next assessment cycle. Even with strong guardrails, verify sustained effectiveness by periodically sampling closed items. Choose a cadence proportionate to severity and system volatility, perhaps monthly for high-risk areas and quarterly for moderate ones, and retest a small representative subset using the original replication steps. Record the results in a simple register with dates, methods, and outcomes. If a sample fails, reopen the POA&M entry or create a new one tied to the original, and document what failed and why. This practice turns closure from a point event into a monitored state. It also sharpens your understanding of where controls hold under stress and where additional reinforcement is needed. Keep a simple memory anchor to guide the team under time pressure. Fix, prove, record, communicate, prevent recurrence. Fix means implement the change that removes or reduces the risk. Prove means show effectiveness and persistence with clear, reproducible evidence. Record means capture dates, verifiers, and artifacts in the POA&M entry. Communicate means update stakeholders and dashboards promptly so decisions track reality. Prevent recurrence means wrap the change with monitoring and change control, then sample periodically. When this sequence becomes habit, the organization's closure rate rises and its residual risk falls in ways that are measurable and durable.
In conclusion, solid closures are not achieved by optimism or by toggling a status flag. They are earned by meeting defined criteria, verifying outcomes, and locking improvements into the fabric of operations. A closed POA&M item should read like a short, coherent story. The weakness found, the fix applied, the proof collected, the documents updated, and the safeguards that keep it fixed. As you finish the current batch, the next action is practical and repeatable. Publish a concise closure checklist. That checklist codifies the criteria, evidence types, retest expectations, documentation updates, communication steps, and regression protections described here. With the checklist in hand, teams can close faster, defend their results more easily, and keep improvements in place when the environment changes. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.